Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I don't know about you, but my head is still spinning from the whole election situation, even in the last week. It changes by essentially the minute. Let's look at that from the lens of ethics and business ethics. And he's somebody that has made it his life's work to practice just that as a professor, researcher, and so much more. And he joins us once again. Ronald Berenbeim is on the program. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
Well, like you, my head's been spinning for the last couple of weeks. And I was reminded of this question that somebody asked Benjamin Franklin when he left the Constitutional Convention. And someone asked him, "What kind of country have you given us, Ben?" And Franklin said, "A republic, if you can keep it." So I'm going to go through our frame, which we've used for all the issues that we've discussed in this series. Things like Boeing safety and artificial intelligence and cell phones and all this kind of stuff.
Social media, that was another one we hit upon too,
Social
right?
media, yeah, and we're going to give it a shot. So, as you will recall, the business ethics frame has three different categories through which you consider the pros and cons of a particular situation. And the first of these is broadly described as economics. Now, you've probably seen any number of surveys that indicate that economics is the number one issue with many respondents. I don't really think they mean John Maynard Keynes or anything like that. I think what they mean is, what's in it for me? There hasn't been enough in it for me lately. So the economics part of the whole thing is grounded in the utilitarian phrase of Jeremy Bentham, who said that, the ideal situation was when the benefits of society, the greatest goods, were allocated to the greatest number in some form or another. Well, there have been many attempts to do this. One of the ones we've discussed briefly was the GI Bill and Social Security, where the government paid for benefits for people who could not afford them, and they taxed high-income individuals and corporations to make up the difference. Well, after a while, as you can understand, high-income individuals got a little tired of that. And so they invented, and I think that is not too strong a word, this theory of trickle down. Now, I don't know what trickle down meant to you, but it usually meant in my household that my brother's diaper had to be changed. But in any event, and that's pretty much how it worked from the early 1980s until recently, when the Biden administration really, and to a lesser extent, the Obama administration kind of rejiggered these formulas. But, suppose you have, for example, a change in the way of keeping airlines on schedule that saves, maybe $2 a flight, 12 cents of which is passed on to the public in the form of cheaper tickets, and the rest of which is accumulated by the corporation and either used to buy back stock or to pay bonuses or to increase salaries of the top five people. And that really, this misallocation, if you want to call it that, maybe you don't believe it is, And it has not that often resulted even in new products or price reductions for existing products. And as I'm sure you're well aware, whether you've tried to travel in the last 3 or 4 days or not, that numerous flights, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flights have been delayed or canceled, and the airline that has suffered the most, probably through exercise of their own poor judgment, has been Delta. So what you want to do in terms of determining how ethical a particular course of conduct is to try to figure out a formula for a distribution of the greatest goods to the greatest benefit to the greatest number. And a government, which is what Kamala Harris or Donald Trump seek to lead, within the course of that would be considering, most importantly, and I want to emphasize this because that was primarily what Franklin meant when he answered that question, a republic, if you can keep it, is a peaceful transfer of power. And it needs to be remembered that perhaps the first close brush we had with one that wasn't was just not even 4 years ago. So, or actually about 4 years ago. So that's important. But other issues that we have discussed have involved the product safety, as we did in the case of Boeing, labor organizing, which is a counterweight to the misallocation of resources by the organizing of by labor unions, which is under the protection of the federal government, which has prosecutes companies and unions for unfair labor practices. So that's the law. Now, the third category is the one that belongs exclusively or close to exclusively to ethics, and that is the cultivation of virtue. And two forms of it: institutionally, as you know, most probably the oldest and most common example of this is the armed forces. But the cultivation of virtue in universities and so on, and that sort of thing. But they can cultivate institutional virtue, and that is they have a floor plan for that from Plato, or they can cultivate, or they cultivate individual virtue, which Aristotle has set forth, and these are probity, honesty, temperance, and courage, and most important of all, courage. And the first breach in the virtue project is when there is not a peaceful transfer of power. And people forget that easily enough. I credit them for, I will allow that, perhaps the best example of that is in the play Julius Caesar, where Brutus and Cassius are standing outside the Roman Forum, waiting for the entrance of Caesar and his entourage. And Caesar has obtained power in an unacceptable way by traditionalists of the Roman Republic, most importantly and most admired, of which was Brutus. And the and Cassius says to Brutus, the fault may not be in our stars, it may be in ourselves. We are underlings. And so what follows is, as we all know, the assassination of Julius Caesar. And in Mark Antony's famous eulogy, in which he came to bury Caesar, not to praise him, noted that Caesar had brought back in his war-making episodes many hostages, the ransom of which has filled the coffers of Rome. And he described the parks and festivals that were paid for with that money. But was that the greatest good for the greatest number? We can ask that now. Mark Antony was asking that then. So that's kind of an introduction. We can take it from here. Got some questions here?
The transfer of power. Let's talk about that. We're looking at that right now. There's a ethical spin on that as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the thing about the transfer of power is that it is perhaps the most widely prescribed and detailed set of instructions you can find in almost any country, in almost any company, in almost any organization. And it is also the most widely abused. So I can't even begin to imagine, to describe the different ways it can be abused or has been. But clearly it was a clear example of it occurred. Well, it's getting to be about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And there is, since one of the protagonists in this election was one of the protagonists in the previous instance, there is more reason than one might ordinarily have to have reasonable concern that such an episode might be repeated.
With our current political situation, everything that's going on, do you, looking at it, through ethics, economics, everything involved here, and I'm not intending to get political here today, are you genuinely concerned?
I would take the word genuinely off. I think the fact that we went as long as we did, even through the election of Lincoln at the outbreak of the Civil War, we went as long as we did with a peaceful transfer of power, and we are on alert now again about the possibility that we should have reasonable concern. I think there is cause for concern, but not great concern. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. What do you think this looks like? And again, I'm not intending here to get political, but what does it look like to other countries? Just face value. These are the news stories. People read them. People are in other countries exposed to them. What do you think they're internalizing, and what do you think their thoughts are of the United States?
Well, I think that if you look at almost any country you can think of, France, certainly, England/UK, remember Oliver Cromwell and remember the, 100 Years' War and so on. And then to other countries where such things have happened much more recently, such as Russia, China, It's hard to find a major country that seeks to exercise, power and influence and moral suasion on other countries that has not had this experience. That is our brand, that we have not had it. We have only come close, and the fact that we came close uh, hurt, but we still haven't actually had it the way virtually every other country that seeks to exert influence and moral suasion uh, on the course of affairs in the world has experienced it. Excuse me.
Do you think our strength has been diminished in their eyes, many of the countries?
Well, I would say maybe not quite yet, because it's like a game of golf. You're allowed one mulligan in this business, provided not too many people get hurt.
Haven't
And
heard that word mulligan in years, by the way. Thank you.
really, and and things turned out okay eventually. But if it happens twice in 4 years, and the second time it is, if you want to put it this way, whatever that may mean to you, quote unquote, successful or more successful than the last one, that would be bad.
Hmm. I want to pivot over to the Microsoft situation of last week, where so many computers were crippled, flights were crippled by this company that Microsoft is connected to. That piece of code was incorrect. Um, Monopoly. Microsoft has the lock on many computers, not just home. I know it gets a little technical, but your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think if there's to be a news bulletin based on this discussion, it would be this: that anybody who has thoughts, I mean, what is reasonably clear is that Microsoft, it seems to me, based on the history of such things, and there have been many such incidents in the past, Microsoft developed a product that offered the company the opportunity to save maybe one half of 1% on the cost of their product. And it was a margin that they greedily devoured as soon as they installed the Microsoft quote unquote improvement. To give Microsoft its due, I mean, what company, what kind of product can you offer 100% satisfaction, which you virtually have to in this sort of situation? The downside risks were very great.
Hmm.
So there should have been, I think, probably more work gone into the product, more work gone into testing it, however much there was. And I'm sure they will tell you there was a lot and they thought it was sufficient at the time. But there should have been more work gone into testing it by both the company and Microsoft. And it should have come as a higher price and been a more difficult decision for the company to make as far as an investment went.
Do you feel the monopoly situation? Your hands are tied. We have no, we can't change anything. You're using Microsoft. The airlines are using Microsoft, and now they're aligned with this company that there was a tech issue. Really, our hands are tied. I don't see any way around this. How does a company turn and say, all right, you know what? I'm going to get a different platform. All right, which one's that going to be? Is Apple going to support, all the things that Microsoft has so far in these in these types of servers and computers. Again, airlines, all of that. Uh,
Well, how about using, and I won't say necessarily as a resident of a company that is on a country that is still trying to recover from a pandemic, whose president is not even protected from that kind of exposure. But perhaps we could use the FDA as a model where the product has to be tested and approved by
hmm,
some government commission of experts or whatever you want to call them. That's the best suggestion I can offer.
hmm, interesting thought. You know, um, at least it would offer some reassurance that is this going to happen again? How do
Oh,
we
it's
know?
going to happen again, but let us just hope on a much, much smaller scale. That's all.
Exactly. It has to happen again.
Yeah.
There's no, way
If
around
it
it.
was happening all the time, all the time you've been traveling. How many times have you had a flight canceled? How many times have you had a flight that was delayed? In the good old days when they were canceled, it wasn't such a bad thing. They put you on a bus, they took you to a luxury hotel, and they put you up there for a while.
Yeah.
Now you wind up sleeping in the street, I mean, it's changed.
Yeah, 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 100%. You're right. And even if they lose your bag, your compensation is minimal. It's, if you're lucky you cover the cost of the luggage and a couple of items, couple of t-shirts inside there. Um, they have a fixed number, for all of that.
Thank goodness I haven't had that happen yet.
Same.
But I virtually never check a bag.
I try not to just for the inconvenience. And I had it one time it happened in a Caribbean island, but they didn't lose the bag, but it showed up the following day. So, okay. Of course, there was no compensation for that. You know, rule of thumb, always travel with some clothes in your backpack or whatever, so if you want to change it out if you're waiting. But yeah, it flying used to be a luxury. Now it's so much different. It's like getting on a bus in a city.
Oh, yeah, I mean, buses are more comfortable usually, but I'll give you an example, but it shows you, may give you an idea of how much things have changed. When we went to Europe, I think the year was 1986, and my older daughter was 3 years old. And at some point, she lost her prize frog, and she was in tears. She, virtually, we didn't think she was going to recover. Fortunately, when we got home, we were able to buy her exactly the same item in the toy store. They were still selling them. More than a month later, we got a call from the airlines that her frog had been found in Frankfurt Airport, and possibly the largest airport in Western Europe in its day, and was on its way to her, and it arrived a couple days later.
Wow.
I wonder if that would have happened today. And that's something she didn't even check. I mean, she just carelessly, I guess, left it. And
There are those isolated incidences where I have a friend, he was a producer for me, yeah, back in the day, and his son, who I think is now 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, loves, wants to be working the gate at an airport. He just wants to. That's what he wanted. He loves it. He looks up to those people. And my friend mentioned it to JetBlue, and his son actually got to be at the gate, check passengers, check their tickets, whether it's paper on the phone, whatever it be, make an announcement with the guidance of, the people around him that work there. So every once in a while, there's those isolated cases where, the airline redeems themselves. But I agree with you. I'd be shocked if an airline would take the time to send back a stuffed animal. And back then, it wasn't like they were doing it for, social media reasons where you'd say, hey, I just got this back. They're great. They're fantastic. They just did it because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, they send back stuffed animals all the time now. Have you watched a news program lately?
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that. Wonderful having you on here. Time will tell if the election is the republic that we want to keep, if we can, and all of that. And appreciate these podcasts with you, Ronald, and just digging into things that affect all of us. Really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here.
Good to talk to you. See you again sometime, I hope.
Absolutely. You too. We'll be right back.
Bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.